This is the Initiates Podcast. Here, we create space to explore the path of initiation as we reawaken the forgotten wisdom that resides within us all. I am your host and guide, Natalie Grace. Join me every Thursday for an enlightening exploration of contemporary spirituality. It's my honour to journey with you. Welcome, beautiful friends, back to the Initiates Podcast. I'm Natalie and I'm excited to be here with you again. I've been on a little break. I know I said that when I returned in January, but turns out I needed a little bit more time. I've noticed a large number of other creators actually also on a bit of a break. So I feel like there's something in the collective energy at the moment, or since the beginning of this year, that's required us to kind of maybe stop talking, stop making, and just come back into alignment with the purpose for what we're doing. So often we can get caught up in our own plans and our own expectations and what other people are doing and come up with this schedule or this list of boxes to tick. And we can kind of forget the reason behind what we're doing. We can lose our way. So that's definitely something that I had been struggling with for the past month and a half, I would say. Feeling a little bit lost, feeling a bit confused about why I choose to be creative in the ways that I choose, making content, creating this podcast, sharing my experiences, my wisdom. I felt like I just needed to be quiet for a little bit longer, and it was well timed because there were a lot of kind of 3D reality, practical world responsibilities that I needed to prioritize that took a lot of my time. And that refocusing was actually really helpful in helping me realign with what I really love to do, my passions and my purpose. So I'm back with a refreshed spirit, with a reprioritization of my responsibilities. And on my little break, I was challenged quite a bit with some shadow aspects of self. It has a lot to do with something I talked about in the first episode of this year, episode 19, about self-belief and future self-envisioning. And even though I have the vision, I have this 5-year vision of what I want to achieve. And I got through the first year of that 5-year vision and achieved a lot. But I was feeling a bit lost about what happens this year, that reverse engineering about what I'm supposed to be focused on. And I realize now, after going through this journey, that there was some blockages in my way that required me to focus my attention on them and remove them. And these blockages were all to do with fear. And the breakthrough that came was through a really interesting lived experience around my fear of the dark, which sounds a little bit childish, but I think a lot of you might share that fear of being outside in the dark, what can happen, the fear of the unknown. And it's a highly symbolic fear, I believe. The dark is our shadow self, so it's fear of our own shadow. But it's also about the unknown and the future, as much as we can envision the future we want to manifest. And no matter how much certainty we can have in that, the future is unknown until it arrives. So this symbolic fear of the dark held such a tremendous lesson for me that really broke me open and allowed me to kind of come to a realization about the way I've been holding myself back And the source of my feeling stuck and confused being about being closely linked to my fear of my own achievements and my own success, my own potential, realizing my own potential. So if this resonates with you, I'm sure it will resonate with a lot of listeners. Stay tuned. I'm going to tell you a story about my cat, and my cat is one of my most profound teachers. He's always sharing lessons with me. So I'm going to be sharing this lesson that I really did stumble upon, but created a huge breakthrough in facing my fears, and what it taught me about the love and fear energetic axis and the power of neutrality that sits in the 0 point between those two poles. Before I get started though, I just want to check in with you guys and see how you're coping with this energy. I would love to know. I feel like I've been dealing with that, aside from a few close friends who I message regularly, been dealing with this crazy energy largely on my own. I've been noticing things in the collective field, but we navigate through this collective field as individuals. And I feel like the collective field has had some really intense energy this past month, perhaps in anticipation of what's coming in March, which we've now arrived in. A lot of prophets or mystics who can see into the near future have been predicting that this year is going to be a little bit challenging, potentially a little bit sticky, and that March is when we get the first taste of the vibe of this year. It also lines up with the astrology, planets moving, particularly Saturn into Pisces, which creates quite a big energetic shift. So there's a lot going on in our energetic atmosphere. And if you're not aware, I am very passionate about tarot. I don't talk about it enough on the podcast, so I'm going to be sharing much more about tarot and the magic of tarot, and especially the magic of symbols of the tarot and universal symbols in general in future episodes of the podcast. But I host a collective tarot reading every month aligned with the new sun season. And in the recent collective reading live stream, which happened on Instagram for Pisces season, some really interesting messages came up around the energy of the dream. I want to say like the dreaming field, the dream space, the astral, that there's a lot of really important work we're all doing at the moment in the astral field. And it is, I want to say, like astral clearing, perhaps. It felt with the message that came through the cards, it had a lot to do with deeper layers of subconscious work on our shadows. So there's a collective shadow work that we're being prompted to do in our dream time, and that it's actually creating a lot of fatigue during our waking hours because we're just not quite aware of how hard we're working while we're sleeping on doing this energetic clearing. So I just wanted to share that because it was like a really strong message that came through that reading, and it's going to apply for another couple of weeks, that around 3 weeks actually, if you're listening to this when it just comes out. But if you're feeling tired and you can't really pinpoint why, if you're feeling like you're not getting the rest you normally do, even though you're sleeping the usual number of hours, if you're having strange dreams, or if you have this sense that you're not remembering how intense your dreams are, this all came through. And I just wanted to say this is normal. Be aware that you're working really hard while you're asleep, and do what you need to do during the daytime if you can. If you're in the luxurious position of being able to nap, go for it. Even a small nap will be helpful. If you are not and you're at work, you can't really escape for a nap during the day, try to get more sleep, stay hydrated. Grounding is really important right now. I think it's there's also this energy of hyper electrical energy I've been sensing in my own field that's been affecting my physical body. So if that's something that you're feeling, an anxiety, it kind of feels like the sensation of anxiety, but it hasn't come from your thoughts or your feelings. It is this feeling of erratic electricity in your body that you didn't create yourself. It's come from the field. So the best thing you can do in that sense is to ground using the elements of the earth. I love working with the earth itself, especially plants. One beautiful nectarine tree taught me this, but if you sit or stand at the tree's level, depending on how big this tree is, my nectarine tree is probably my height, and I have a chair that sits right opposite this nectarine tree. Her branches are outstretched. It's like she's stretching out her hands to me to hold. And I do. I hold her branches, I hold her leaves, and we exchange energy. You can do that with plants. You can do that with the earth. You can also use air. I posted this on the Instagram page this week because it felt appropriate to share that air is amazing at blowing away both stagnancy from the field, kind of like those energetic cobwebs of old crap. But I think it's also really powerful in moving erratic electrical energy. I want to say that if you consciously can stand in a breeze, the breeze is the most powerful, I think, and allow it to just blow away anything you want to get rid of. It will do that for you. It's really beautiful to allow the wind to remove that stuck energy. So there's a couple of tips, just some practical guidance to help us navigate the energy of this time. And I would love to hear how you're navigating through this energy yourself, how you've been affected by it. If you're totally fine, you haven't felt the effects at all, or if you've been challenged by it, send me a message on Instagram. I would love to hear from you, or leave me a comment on one of the posts, or head on over to the Initiates chat on Telegram. There's a growing group of beautiful, welcoming souls in the Telegram chat. We are all really open, and it's a place for people with open minds and open hearts to connect. And as I've said previously, if you vibe with me and my voice and my message on this podcast, you're obviously going to vibe with others who vibe with me. And I feel it's my duty to connect as many of you as are seeking connection. So if that's you, come and join us in the Telegram chat. The link to it is in the show notes for this episode. We would love to welcome you in. Okay, so I guess it's story time. Let's journey. Regular listeners will be familiar with my cat, Bread. Bread is a cute little muffin. He's also my soulmate in cat form. He's one of my greatest teachers, and I hold so much love for him because not only is he incredibly special to me, and we pretty much spend every second of the day together, it would be one of the reasons I couldn't go back to a real job. I'm doing the finger quotes here, because I would just hate to leave him during the daytime, which sounds so silly, but he's so special to me. And it all stems from how we came to meet each other. I was looking for a cat, and I have always been, I want to say, obsessed with cats since I was a child, and people thought it was silly. And, we have this like crazy cat lady trope in our culture, but I think it goes much deeper, and it definitely goes into past life stuff for me. Cats were just absolutely sacred beings in ancient Egypt, and they hold this wisdom key about the power of vibration, the healing power of vibration that we don't really even understand yet. So this is definitely one of the things Bread has been teaching me just through his being, his existence, his sharing of his purring and his command of vibration, I want to say. So to me, it's not just about cats. It's about this really deep past life connection with the power of vibration for me. Anyway, but since I was a little girl, I've always loved cats, and I've had all the cat books and I knew all the cat breeds and I've been fascinated by them. So even though all my cats have been adopted, for some reason they've been these fancy breeds. And I was just really interested in this breed of cat called the Selkirk Rex because it was curly and it looked so cool. And I read that the Selkirk Rex is cheeky and kind of like a clown, and I thought the personality sounded really cool. And one day after fostering another cat, which I had to return, which was all part of the plan and that was totally fine, I realized, you know what, I don't want to be without a cat in my life, so it's time to adopt a cat. And so I started looking through like classified ads and stuff. We have this platform in Australia called Gumtree, very Aussie. So I'd scroll through Gumtree and I happened to find someone giving away a Selkirk Rex, and it turned out she was a breeder. And it was very surprising because we don't really have many of that breed of cat in Australia. Especially at that time, there hadn't been any kind of viral Selkirk Rexes yet. And I kind of just had this feeling that the cat wasn't in a great situation with this woman and that I had to rescue him. I knew it was a boy, even though, even if he wasn't a match for me, I would take him and find the right match for him. But I hoped he would be a match for me. And there were so many red flags with this woman. You know, if you don't come today, like, you know, me inquiring, she was just assuming that I was going to adopt him. And I was like, well, I'd love to meet him. And she just basically was like, well, if you come to meet him, you're taking him. So I was like, okay, fine. You shouldn't assume that, but sure. He was free, which is also like not quite common if you're dealing with breeders, right? She did tell me some stories about how she tried to show him and he wasn't really suited for that and breeding. So, and he was causing issues with the other kittens. But when I was with my partner and like when we got to the house, I kind of told him like, no matter what, we're taking him and we'll deal with the aftermath of that when we leave. It was a terrible place. The cats were just in a really dirty environment and he was so cute. And so we took him and we were really happy to take him because she was basically threatening to put him down if we didn't. So of course we were happy to take him. But he ended up having a problem with his heart that wasn't disclosed to us, and it became very clear that she didn't really want to look after that problem that he had. So anyway, my sharing all these details about the story of Bread and how we came to meet are really important because part of my bond with him, perhaps my soul contract, is to look after him, make sure his health is looked after, because he did have a heart attack really early in his life when he was only about 2. And if I wasn't there, I happened to be late for work that morning. And if I wasn't there to take him to the vet, I don't know what would have happened. And I feel like we are really bonded and have this really close connection. And I have this sacred responsibility to care for this little cat. And in exchange, he teaches me things about vibration and about love, which this lesson has a lot to do with. Okay, so I really wanted to share that part about our kind of origin story because it's important for you to understand like how much he means to me and how seriously I take the responsibility of looking after him. And so he's an inside cat, but he, you know, we live on a farm and he does like to go exploring, but he's quite responsible. He doesn't really go wandering unless he's being a bit naughty. And we have a, routine when we take him out. And during the day, he doesn't really go far. He's quite old now, so he doesn't really jump fences or climb trees or anything like that anymore. He just likes to do his cat magic. So he walks the perimeter of the house to protect us. And then he will maybe sit outside for a bit longer and watch some birds and stuff and just chill in the air and soak up the sun. And he's a very peaceful little boy. And we have this routine where we will go out together in the evening to do a quick little walk to the chicken coop in the backyard, lock up the chicken coop, come inside. Sometimes he likes to stay out a bit longer, but I keep an eye on him to make sure he comes in. And if he's been a bit too long, I'll go grab him and bring him in because I want to make sure he's safe. And it's also important to protect the wildlife. So sometimes I can be a little bit scattered and sometimes I can get distracted. And one night we did our chicken coop walk a little bit later than usual. It was like around 11 o'clock or so, and I forgot about him. I got distracted and I forgot about getting him and meeting him at the door. Normally I'll meet him at the door and he's on the other side and he'll wander in and that's that. And so I went to the door. I rushed to the door because quite some time had passed and he wasn't there. And I went to the other door and he wasn't at that door either. And so I'm like, okay, I've got to find him. And at this point, I was confronted with some fear. So normally, if this happens, I will enlist the help of my partner and we'll go looking for him together. And if it's late at night, the dark is always less scary when someone's there with you. And I just want to set the scene because we live on a farm with some horse stables, which look a bit spooky. We are situated near a little forest, which has got some pretty spooky energy in there. I've had some interactions with the energy of that forest, which make it a little bit mysterious, I want to say. And so there's some very dark, very spooky parts of the farm. And I don't generally want to go into those places, into those parts of the farm in the middle of the night. So this is probably around 11:30 or so. And I was like, okay, I've got to go find him. And normally if I had to go outside at night, I would take a big torch and I would be very cautious and I wouldn't want to go very far. But on this particular night, I was so driven to find bread that my fear didn't really come into my experience. I didn't allow it to be felt because my responsibility to find bread was so much more important. And my partner's also been laid up because he's been dealing with some health stuff. So he couldn't help me and I didn't want to stress him out. So I was just like, okay, I'm doing this on my own. And this all sounds very dramatic. It's just the dark, but I think there are so many of us who hold a fear of being outside in the dark because we've been programmed to fear being outside in the dark, even though it's actually our natural environment as humans. There have been times in our history where we weren't afraid of the dark. It was just the other part of the other side of the daytime. The night's the other side of the daytime. And we were connected with the stars. We were connected with the moon. We were connected with what the nature looked like and felt like in the dark. Whereas now we have homes that we escape to and kind of lock up and turn the lights on as soon as the dark arrives. We are also taught through news narratives and true crime and horror films to be terrified of what can happen, the danger that lurks in the dark. So on my farm, there's really not many people around. It's a very irrational fear to hold that something bad's going to happen to me on the farm. I could trip over something, sure, but the idea of someone attacking me or something like that, as if it was a dark alley, it's just not a rational fear. But it's still a fear I held, and I'm sure it's a fear that many of you can relate to. So I have to find bread. It's my absolute mission. I am chanting positive affirmations to find him the whole time. I am enlisting the help of my spirit team, the angels, the fae that exist, that live in the trees around the perimeter of the farm. And I can't find him. I'm doing large laps of the farm and the spooky forest that's next door and the gardens that are next door. And I can't find him. He's not showing himself. And I think after probably half an hour, I was kind of like, okay, do I feel scared? How do I feel right now? And I thought about it. I'm like, I'm in the dark. I'm wandering around by myself. Am I scared of the dark? And at that moment, I was like, I'm not scared right now. That's not the fear I hold. The only concern I have right now is that bread won't come back. And that was ultimately my fear. But I wouldn't allow myself to feel that either. And at that moment, well, upon reflection later, when I was trying to understand why I felt so differently that time, because there was a lot more to fear, you know, losing my cat in the dark was pretty scary. But I realized that the power, the energy of love was more powerful than the energy of fear. And it sounds really trite because like every spiritual teaching says this. It's not like I've never heard this before. I just haven't lived it before. And I think it might be different if you're a parent, for instance. You probably already know this and you're like, really, it's only taken you this long to find this out. But I'm not a parent, so I don't have that sense of responsibility and that sense of deep love for another human that would help me overcome any fear. This is a different experience that I live, and this gateway that my cat provided me to understand how much my love helped me overcome in that moment not only meant that I didn't give up looking for him, but that he came back to me. He knew to come back to me. So eventually he did a return, as he does in his very cheeky way. I have no idea where he went, but eventually at one of my returns back to the back gate, he was just sitting there waiting for me. And I was so relieved and I was so happy. And then I was also so proud of myself for not allowing myself to feel overcome by fear in being out in the dark. And again, it's a really simple story. I have made it quite a long tale, but I really wanted to express how different this experience was than it normally is, having to walk outside in the dark and say, check a tap or open a gate or close a gate or something like that. It is normally something that's much more unnerving, and I'm very aware of what could happen to me. And I want to say those fears held all thought programs. None of them were actually coming from my heart. You know, there's real fear. There is rational fear. Rational fear exists when you are in danger and you have evidence of this or evidence of real risk that you're taking. That fear is rational, and that fear needs to be considered because it's a really important signal that your instinct can use to send you a message. But I think upon reflection, so much of our fear is irrational. The large majority of our fears are irrational, I think, because they all come from thought programs and they're not about anything happening in the now, where there's tangible evidence of it happening in the now that's a cause for danger or concern or risk. It's more about the projections into the future of what could potentially happen, and these stories that are planting, especially when it comes to the dark, the stories planted in us, especially if you're a woman, that bad things happen in the dark. And at that moment, a really good thing happened in the dark. So that was really powerful. But the lesson of this love, the power of love to overcome fear, is something that I've really been reflecting on the past few weeks since this has happened, and allowing my new understanding and lived experience of this energetic axis of love and fear. I've wanted to understand it on a deeper level so that I can use it in other aspects of my life and create some kind of method for dealing with other fears I hold. So that's what inspired me to make this episode and share this pretty obvious lesson with you guys. So this kind of like overcoming the fear of the dark has actually been really powerful and come at a really good time for me, because I have been in the very privileged position of having a lovely new little cabin to work from. I'm recording my podcast from this little cabin right now, which is on the farm right next to the spooky forest. And I've had to trek between the house, the farmhouse, and this little cabin, mostly during the day. But if I work late here, I've got to walk through the dark to get to the house. And it's very dark here, especially at this time of the month, because we've just we're heading into the quarter moon. So it's been a very dark sky heading out of the new moon. We've also had a lot of cloud coverage. So it's just it's very, very dark. And just like my love for Bread, my cat, allowed me to overcome my fear of being in the dark, my fear that something bad could happen, that it was scary, my discomfort. My love of working in this space also makes it worth walking back to the house. And the more I work here, the more practice I get at confronting that fear. And I definitely have felt a huge energetic shift since this experience with Bread the cat, that I understand and am actively choosing that my absolute love of working out of this space and my appreciation for the space and my gratitude for the space is so much more powerful than any residual fear of the dark. And now I am able to, with neutrality, walk in the middle of the night from this house to the farmhouse. And it's really cool. I feel really powerful. I feel really confident and accomplished, something that I wouldn't have done with much confidence previously. So both of these things, my cat and my workspace, have proven that they are more important to me than my pre-existing program of fear of being outside in the darkness. So being aware of this as well, this new confidence, this lack of fear that previously was there, has led me to explore the axis of fear and love. So if we see this as a duality, as two poles on an axis, with any part of duality, one pole exists to validate the other and vice versa. Without the other, one cannot exist because it needs the other to have its existence validated. So if we're talking about the dark can't be the dark without the light. The light is what makes the dark, and the dark is what makes the light. The light wouldn't be the light without the dark. And so if we're thinking about plotting fear and love on this energetic, polarized axis, we could say that love is the natural antidote to fear. A lot of people would preach that in the spiritual realm. It's not a new idea by any means. But what I think is more powerful to think about is that the true power is that love has the ability to neutralize fear, and that is what I experienced. It allows the thing that's the fear, that other side of the axis, to exist just as it is and for you to have acceptance of it. Because in that neutral space, you're in the dead center. You're in the space of equilibrium. You are in the very middle point of the axis, which is the 0 point. It's the quantum. It's where all realities exist, including the reality where you're not scared anymore, where you don't hold that fear. Or that fear exists, but it doesn't hold power over you. It doesn't hold you back from doing things. And neutrality is so powerful. Even just the word neutral is linked to neuter or sexless, genderless. Neutral also describes something lacking charge. So it's neither positive nor negative. It simply is. It's neither acidic nor alkaline. So even in nature, even in alchemy, neutrality is a full acceptance of what is. And if we think about love being able to neutralize fear, love is what takes us to the 0 point, to the quantum field, to transform the reality. That is the power of what I experienced. And that is an amazing lesson. Love allows anyone to be able to realize complete neutral acceptance of fear. Therefore, fear loses its charge. It no longer holds power. You can gain acceptance for what it was you feared. And then the feelings of fear and those thoughts triggered by the emotions of fear can be dispelled. And we just talked about that. The most fears are irrational and they're all propelled and reinforced by our thoughts and our programs. And even the word dispelled is very useful here. Through love neutralizing fear, the spell of fear is dispelled. So the spell can be undone. That is magic. That is magical work. That is work in the quantum. So that idea of rational versus irrational fear, I don't want to be irresponsible here in suggesting that all fears are irrational and that we should just ignore them and focus on our love to overcome. When it's a rational fear, we should honor our instinct. If it's something we can feel in our bodies that there is a danger present, then we need to honor that and allow our root chakra to communicate with us and tell us we're in danger. But if it's an irrational fear, if you think about the fear and you know that it's silly, it's an invitation to explore the fear and understand more about it, where it stems from, what it's keeping you from doing, how it might be serving you. And so if the fear is irrational and you've thought about those questions, then it's obviously time to decide whether you want to hold that fear any longer. And this is where the love pathway is really powerful. There's another pathway that I've also discovered and explored, again on the farm. The farm has been such a powerful teacher. Nature is the greatest teacher. This is the power of duty, of sacred duty, even more so than responsibility. Responsibility can definitely push us to overcome our fears, potentially if there's also love involved in that responsibility to neutralize the fears. But I think with responsibility, it might just be we deal with the fear. We do it anyway because we have to. We know we have to. It might not neutralize anything. I'm thinking about someone who might work in a really spooky office building, say cleaning or doing security after hours, and they might get spooked really easily, and they're responsible for doing that job. So it doesn't necessarily mean they hold love that's able to neutralize the fear and they don't hold the fear anymore. But the responsibility can just push you to do the job and deal with it, even if you're feeling that fear. But sacred duty is a little bit different. I think that also holds a power to neutralize fear. I think about the unfortunate part of farming is that sometimes when animals get sick and you lose them, that when they pass and cross the rainbow bridge, it's your sacred duty as their custodian to honor them and bury them. And this is something that I've been confronted with. And, I do my very best to take great care of all my animals, but chickens don't have long lifespans. And I recently lost a chicken to an illness that couldn't really be helped and didn't present itself until it was too late and she was gone. So in that sense, I normally would have handballed the responsibility of handling the dead bird to my partner, because that's a thing that dudes can deal with better, right? Which isn't really true. In this particular case, I just love this little chicken, and I felt like it was my duty to hold her, to handle her. It created such discomfort in me. It really frightened me, even though rationally I knew that it was a dead bird, that she wasn't going to have any fear or any pain by me handling her. She was already passed. It was all something that I had to deal with on my own. It stemmed from me not wanting to feel uncomfortable by handling a dead chicken. It's not something nice to do. And it's also very sad because I care deeply for my animals, and it was a very sad thing to do, which is also very uncomfortable to actually hold that sadness and grief and all those things. So on this particular occasion, I decided it was my duty to face my fear, and it was time for me to handle the animal and to bury her myself. And I did, and it was sad, but I know now that I can do that again in the future, that I'm strong enough to do that, and that her allowing me to face that fear and deal with that fear was such a beautiful gift, even though it was terrible and it was sad. Even in animals' passings, they provide us with such beautiful opportunities to learn and to grow. And that's, I think, what happened there. It was a little bit of a gateway for me, but it was all about facing my fear. So there is a pathway. If I think about whether sacred duty neutralized my fear, I don't think it neutralized it, but it gave me the courage to face it, and I won't hold the same fear in future. I still probably will feel fearful of feeling discomfort and feeling sadness and feeling helplessness, but I won't hold the same fear of actually touching the dead bird as I did. So that's another little lesson that could be cool to share here, that if you feel like you do have a sacred duty and it's not so powerfully linked to the love, where the love can neutralize, it can get close. So I've talked a bit about the pathway of love in neutralizing fear, but I just want to also reiterate how powerful an emotion fear is. The evidence we have is right in front of us, and it's really all we need to know. Fear is the emotion that is harnessed by the holders of power to create situations where we are disempowered. The emotion of fear is used to create situations where we as the collective can be controlled. We as a collective can be turned against each other and fight, attack each other. And as I talked about with all those news narratives and entertainment narratives, fear can be harnessed to create a situation where we develop a deep distrust of the natural world and detach from the natural world. And this is becoming a generational burden. It's all created. It's not real. But it's got such a powerful frequency, fear. And I've received a lot of wisdom about fear from the Akashic records. I might actually do a bonus episode this week with a channeling about fear, because it has the potential to shake the earth, the vibration of fear. If as a collective we hold enough fear, Gaia works her power to rebalance the energy of the collective. it's a really powerful lesson. I will record this and release it a little bit after this episode because I want you guys to hear it. But that's how powerful fear is. Fear is so powerful that it holds us back from actually living what we come here to do in our soul contracts. It's like the ultimate karmic challenge. It's the ultimate challenge of our existence, is to overcome our fear and also to understand fear so that we don't allow it to overpower us. We are challenged to find ways to neutralize the power of this fear. Through shadow work, we come to accept our fears. And as I've just shared, love is another pathway to do that. So it was important to reiterate how powerful a vibration, how powerful an energy fear is, and how obviously it's used to disempower us and keep us from realizing our full potential on an individual level. So after receiving this lesson, what I've really been sitting with is, okay, love is the pathway. So looking at things in my life that I'm afraid of, and there's been a big focus for me on career at the moment, purpose, work, whatever we want to call it. What am I afraid of? And it seems really clear that I am afraid of realizing my own potential, my own success, my own power. And I'm like, well, how do I use love here? And it became really clear after some pondering that, well, if I felt held back, if I felt stuck, if I felt crippled by my fears, well, then maybe I really need to refocus on what I love about what I do in order to overcome my fears. And so I was much more focused on processes and ticking boxes and doing what other people were doing that have achieved success. And I'd really lost my way because I stopped actually doing what I loved, or I stopped thinking about what I loved about what I was doing, stopped honoring that part, stopped feeling gratitude to be able to do what I love. So things became much more of a burden, like things I had to do, and I felt like I wasn't doing enough and I was failing. And what this lesson taught me was to just take a step back and let go of all those expectations I'd placed on myself based on what other people were doing, and simply refocus on what I love. And it has been so empowering. It has been so reinvigorating. I have a renewed, refreshed sense of purpose and passion for what I'm here to do. And it's all about teaching people how to read the universal language of symbols, starting in the tarot, but it applies to so much more than just tarot cards. So that is a true love and a true passion of mine. And I love sharing. I love reading for the collective. That is so important to me. I love, love, love doing that, and I'm not going to stop doing that. So if you haven't joined me for one of my collective reads, do follow me at Crystal Aura Tarot on Instagram, or head on over to crystalauratarot.com to learn more about what I do. But that's something, and then interacting with people in a way of sharing and collaborating is so important to me too. It was such a huge part of my previous career, working in tech and project management, and I achieved some really amazing success in my previous career. And I reflect on that too, going back to times where I didn't feel fear, or I felt so driven by my duty or my responsibility or my passion to just push through the fear or accept the fear and do it anyway. And that was something that I remembered, that I just loved working with other people. And so teaching in my new career is a really great gateway for me to be able to connect with people again in a more collaborative way of sharing and empowering and motivating one another to expand our knowledge, expand our wisdom, and advance our skills. So that's where I'm at. That's where this journey of accepting and neutralizing fear has led me to. And it has given me confidence to share again, to share more about myself on social media, which I've been reluctant to do, and to also come back to this podcast and speak again with you all. I had felt blocked because of wanting to do it perfectly, I guess, or wanting to choose the right topics that resonate. But honestly, so far in the podcast, I've been responding to the energy and my intuition about what people need to hear each week. And I'm just going to continue to honor that because I think that will be most aligned with my love for working with my clairsenses and my intuition. Yeah, so that's my lesson. That's been my story and my journey over the past 4, 5, 6 weeks. If you're still with me, I thank you so much for hanging around and sharing this experience with me. If you are dealing with fear at the moment or have your own wisdom that you'd like to share about fear, as I said in the intro, I invite you to come and chat in the Initiates Telegram group. If you'd like to do that, we have some really amazing conversations in there. Just check the link in the show notes. One last thing. I'm running a workshop this weekend, so if you happen to catch this episode early, you might be interested in attending. It is a workshop called Intuitive Tarot 101. It's a live 2-hour interactive workshop on Zoom where I am going to be teaching the importance of deepening your connection with your intuition in your tarot practice. And I just want to note, this isn't just about tarot cards. If you prefer oracle cards, it's so applicable to that as well because it's all about intuition. If you're familiar with my tarot practice, a lot of people talk about it being unique or a bit different to what they're used to. My method is working intuitively with the symbols, the symbolic language. And the very first step, the foundation of my communication with the symbols is it all begins with intuition. So it's the very first step. So if you'd like to learn more about how to deepen your intuitive connection with your tarot practice, then check out the link in the show notes. If you happen to hear this afterwards and you find this interesting, there will be a sign-up form to register your interest if you'd like to attend in the future. If you are in Australia, it is happening on Saturday, March 4 at 12:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. So that's Melbourne or Sydney time. If you're in the USA, this is happening on Friday night, March the 3rd, 5:30 p.m. PST or 8:30 p.m. EST. And it is $45 Australian to attend, which works out to be about $30 US. So the link to the event page and tickets is in the show notes. I hope to see you there. Thank you again for listening to this episode. I really am super happy to be back with you. And I look forward to next week's episode. Until then, have a beautiful week. Enjoy the crazy energy. I wish you peace and lots of love to help you neutralize your fears.